Imagine a massive Dutch company. Founded nearly 400 years ago, its valuation was so staggering that even if you combined the market caps of today's giants, Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, and Saudi Aramco, you still wouldn't come close to this single company. When we think of such monumental wealth, capitalism, or deep-rooted old money, names like the Rothschilds or the Rockefellers usually come to mind, right? Yet few remember that quiet little Dutch company that fundamentally transformed the world behind the scenes. In reality, they created the world's first official corporation, the first stock exchange, and the first initial public offering, IPO, in human history. And do you know what the most fascinating part is? The legacy of this structure still lives on among us today. So fasten your seatbelts. Today we're diving into the groundbreaking and extraordinary story of the Dutch East India Company, VOC, and the House of Orange behind it. 1580. The balance of power shifts at sea. Let me take you back to 1580, to the Iberian Peninsula. A massive, world-shaking event is unfolding. Spain absorbs Portugal under a personal union. With two global maritime powers unified under a single crown, vast territories across Asia, Africa, and the Americas instantly fall under Spanish control. For the Dutch, who were fighting a war of independence against Spanish rule at the time, this posed an existential threat. Suddenly, they were facing an empire far larger and seemingly unstoppable. The Dutch quickly realized they couldn't defeat this giant with guns and swords alone. So, they developed a brand new weapon: private capital. Capital over weapons, the birth of the VOC. In 1602, 7 different private trading companies merged their forces to form a massive umbrella entity. Let's not strain ourselves trying to pronounce the original name. We'll simply call it the VOC, or the Dutch East India Company. It was named East India because their trade primarily focused on the region we know today as Indonesia, Malaysia, and the surrounding islands. On the surface, it looked like an ordinary group of merchants, right? But beneath the decks, this company was a full-fledged economic warfare machine. It possessed its own armored warships. It maintained private mercenary armies and military forts around the globe. Its most radical innovation, however, was its shares. For the first time in history, ordinary Dutch citizens could buy shares to become co-owners, funding imperial expansion while earning a share of the profits. The VOC didn't rely on a monarch, nor did it need to raise taxes on the public. Wealth was no longer tied exclusively to land or nobility titles. It had become a mass power manufactured directly through markets. A dynasty without a throne, the House of Orange moves. The merchants ran the business and drew up the plans, but another force held the foundation of this giant together, the House of Orange. At the time, the House of Orange was one of the most prominent dynasties, yet they possessed no actual kingdom to rule over. Their noble titles meant little in this new Dutch republic dominated by trade and the burgher class. Trapped between Amsterdam elites who wanted tighter republican control and the Spanish who wanted their lineage erased, they were squeezed from both sides. The House of Orange faced a choice: fade into the dusty pages of history or adapt. Realizing they could no longer rely on feudal land or inherited gold, they played their strongest card: financial capital. They didn't run the VOC directly, but they bankrolled it and tied their future to it. Decades later, this connection became official. Descendants of the House of Orange, William IV and William V, served as stadtholders, top officials, and took on the roles of presidents of both the VOC and the West India Company. They may not have worn crowns, but their power was built directly on corporate dividends. $7.9 trillion and a sovereign state on sales. The VOC didn't operate like a regular business, it acted as a fully sovereign state. At its peak, its market valuation reached an astonishing $7.9 trillion in today's money. To put that into perspective, Nvidia, currently the world's most valuable company, is barely half that amount. During its golden era from the early 1600s to the mid-1700s, over 1 million people set sail from the Netherlands bound for Asia. These weren't just dream-chasing adventurers. They were contracted employees of a mega corporation. They managed ports, guarded warehouses, and enforced Dutch interests, sometimes at gunpoint, across Ceylon, Sri Lanka, Java, Bengal, and beyond. With 150 merchant ships, 50,000 employees, and a 10,000-strong private army, the company dominated the seas. In 1619, they captured Jakarta, renaming it Batavia after the ancient name of the Netherlands. Batavia served as the command hub for all regional trade and power for the next 300 years. Finance takes the stage, the first stock market, IPO, and limited liability. So, how did this massive machine stay afloat? Instead of relying on royal loans, the VOC introduced financial innovations that permanently reshaped the world. The first IPO. In August 1602, it opened its doors to the public. Anyone could buy shares and invest in its future. The Amsterdam Stock Exchange. To allow free trading of these shares, the world's first secondary stock market, the Amsterdam Stock Exchange, was born. Derivatives and futures. Traders didn't just buy and sell shares, they pioneered short selling, speculation, and hedging, building the exact toolkit Wall Street uses today. Limited liability. This was the ultimate legal breakthrough. If a ship sank or a trade route collapsed, investors only lost what they put in. Their personal property and homes were completely safe. This protection gave people the confidence to invest their savings fearlessly. Starting at an index value of 100 in 1602, VOC shares rose tenfold to around 1,000 by the 1720s. History's first major case of investment, FOMO, unfolded right here, from London to New York. This financial ingenuity didn't stay confined to Dutch borders. In 1688, as England faced a political crisis, British leaders invited William III, William of Orange, to take the throne. Through what history remembers as the Glorious Revolution, William became King of England. William brought the Dutch financial blueprint with him. The Bank of England was established. Government bonds and public credit systems were introduced. War funding was shifted onto capital markets. Meanwhile, back in 1609, the ship Halve Maen sailing for the VOC had already reached New York Harbor. By 1624, the Dutch established New Amsterdam at the southern tip of Manhattan. When the British captured it in 1664 and renamed it New York, they kept the Dutch legal and commercial structures intact. The merging of Amsterdam's and London's financial DNA laid the foundation that eventually turned New York into the financial center of the modern world. Collapse of an empire and the modern legacy. Yet every giant has its limits. By the late 1700s, the VOC began to buckle under its own weight. Internal corruption reached all-time highs. Decision-making became sluggish and bureaucratic. Rising military costs and fierce competition from Britain and France drained its resources. In 1795, the Dutch government stepped in to nationalize the company, and in 1796, this mighty corporate empire quietly dissolved. However, the financial system they built never died. Modern Netherlands may no longer rule the high seas, but it remains a massive financial empire. With over $4.3 trillion in inward foreign direct investment and $3.5 trillion in overseas holdings, it stands as a global hub for capital. The House of Orange-Nassau remains on the throne, deeply connected to global commerce. Foundations laid during this era contributed to modern giants like Royal Dutch Shell, formed in 1907, and global financial institutions like ING Group. The dark side of the coin, massacres and exploitation. Alongside these financial breakthroughs, we cannot ignore the horrific human toll left behind by the VOC. To protect its profit margins, the company used brutal methods across Asia. Banda Island's massacre. To maintain a monopoly on nutmeg, nearly the entire indigenous population was wiped out or enslaved and replaced with Dutch settlers. Amboina massacre. Rival English and Japanese traders were executed under conspiracy charges. Batavia massacre. Thousands of ethnic Chinese civilians were slaughtered in present-day Jakarta. Forced labor. Indigenous populations were forced into plantation labor, with any resistance crushed by military force. Their contributions to modern finance were immense, but this wealth was undoubtedly built on extreme exploitation and bloodshed. Which brings us to today's question. As you can see, the architects of modern capitalism weren't just the Rothschilds or the Rockefellers. Long before them, the House of Orange and the VOC had already designed the master blueprint, merging war, trade, and finance into a single corporate state model. Which leads us to a crucial question that remains relevant today. If the power once held by monarchs now rests in the hands of the markets, who truly governs the markets? When the crown becomes invisible, who actually sits on the throne? If you've made it this far with me, don't forget to drop an orange emoji. Why? In the comments. If you enjoyed this, please like the video and subscribe to support the channel. We're so close to 100,000 subscribers and I could really use your help. Also, if you enjoy these historical finance documentaries, make sure to check out the video I made on the Warburg family. It's a fascinating story you'll definitely love. Thanks so much for watching and see you in the next story.